my project, The Influence of Occupation Segregation and Personality on the Wage Gap. My name is Grace Gillette, and I am a psychology major here at Cal Poly Pomona in the Kellogg Honors College. My mentor throughout this project has been Dr. Michael Zhang. Getting into it, the study that I conducted during the course of my senior project was expanding on research regarding the connections between men and women's personality traits, which are the big five: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, and wages across different occupations. The research questions that guided my entire study were: how do personality traits influence wages across occupations? And how does occupation segregation impact the wage gap? Before I go any further, I'd like to clarify what these variables are. Occupation segregation specifically is the disproportionate representation of women or men in an occupation. While this may not seem like an issue at first, research has shown that when there is a disproportionate representation of women in an occupation, it is more challenging to receive a wage increase, and there are less chances of being promoted. The personality variable that I used, which were the 5 traits I talked about earlier, all have previous research that connect earnings to that specific trait. Now, how did I collect my data? I got my data from the National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent to Adult Health, which is survey data. I had a total of 4,671 participants. They all ranged from 23 different occupations. I took these participants and I grouped them into 4 salary brackets. I did this to address normality issues with the data. You can see the 23 different occupations here. The measures that were used throughout the survey data were the 20-item mini international personality item pool, and 1 wage question that came from the demographic portion of Ad Health. An example of one of the personality questions is, for extroversion, one of the questions is, I don't talk a lot. The participant would look at that question and rate on a scale of 1 to 5, strongly agree to strongly disagree, how they felt. Now, going back to those research questions, the results that I found when I ran a multiple regression analyses were that for men in the lowest salary bracket, extroversion was a significant predictor of an increase in wage. For men in the lower middle salary bracket, once again, extroversion related to higher wage. For women in this bracket, those who reported higher tendencies of neuroticism were associated with having lower wages. In the upper middle salary bracket, it was found again that men who tended to be more extroverted were associated with having higher wages. Also, men who scored more neurotic were associated with having lower wages. In the highest salary bracket, I found this result to be the most interesting. Women who scored more agreeable and conscientious were related with higher wages. However, women who tended to score higher in neuroticism had lower wages. Looking at the second research question, how does occupation segregation impact wage? I ran a chi-square independent samples test, and I did find that women are proportionally overrepresented in occupations making the lowest amount of money, so in the lowest bracket. Now, what do these results mean? So looking at this table, I think, is the best way to understand the distribution of the results. So looking at the male results, for extroversion specifically, there were barely any other results for, except for neuroticism. Across the board, almost, except for the highest salary bracket, men who scored higher with extroversion tended to have increased wage. And all of these results are in dollars. So for example, in the lowest salary bracket, men who scored higher on extroversion tended to have an increased wage of $5,063.24. So for every 1 point higher that they scored on this personality trait measure was this much of an increase in wage on average. And what I found to be most interesting about my results was for women. Women tended not to have results except in the highest salary bracket. Um, the results displayed that personality only really mattered when women were earning their highest potential. This poses new research ideas for further studies, such as what specific occupations' wages are impacted by personality. Moving on to the implications of my second research question, consistent with literature, the results illustrated that there was a significant overrepresentation of women and men in many career paths. Also, results express that women were overrepresented in the lowest salary bracket. This emphasizes the downfalls of overrepresentation. This is consistent with literature that states that there are less opportunities to increase wage in female-dominated occupations. Thank you so much for coming to my poster, and please click on the link if you'd like to see it all at one time. Thank you.